Hi, everyone. Let's start another conversation in my series that I branded Let's Talk. So let's begin at the beginning. My name is Philip Andre. I'm a consultant that's been working in the field of technology and payments, and most recently, elections. The words that I put up on the screen are words that have filled my vocabulary at various points in time. And today, the goal is to talk about this field of payments. But before we talk about payments, we need to kind of set my standard objective, a reminder that what we're here to do is really help you to think about where you want to be in the future and to think about how we design the present to take us there. And as we think about payments, we have to think about the economy. We have to think about the globe. We have to think about our world. And we have to think about these things that are changing. And I'm going to talk a lot about the Internet of Things in the next few minutes. We're going to understand that there's this thing called the cloud. We know that people are collecting data. We know that cyber identity, given 2020 and the number of Zoom meetings and the digital interactions that we took part in and our connected life is changing everything. And people talk about something called the fourth industrial revolution. And somewhere in the middle of this is your identity. And when I think about your identity, I think about the relationships that we establish as we roam this planet and as we meet and attach ourselves to various organizations, clubs, peoples, and friends. And somewhere in all of that, we create artifacts, we create credentials, we create identifiers. And as we move into the payment space, one of those identifiers becomes your account number. The other piece of this puzzle, we just talked about the Internet of Things. We talked about this connected world we live in. And I've taken and drawn a picture here of that which I've intersected with and the things that have influenced how we need to look at the future. And as I think about that future, we're going to end up with billions and could be trillions of connected objects, all surrounding us and built upon the cloud and accessible from our devices and our phones using the power of computers wherever they may reside. And again, taking us back and thinking about the fact I was in the payments world back in 1996, I began thinking about the next step. And for me, the next step was the convergence of leather with technology and the ability to take all of those artifacts, all of those relationships, and integrate it into something that I carried that could manage my life for me as it relates to those relationships. It was hard. Payments was the difficult one. And when we think about payments and identity, we begin to think about how do we address fraud? How do we address counterfeit? How do we address the whole question of who are you when you present yourself in the internet? So we then want to kind of walk into what I wanted to talk to you today about, which is a payment transaction. And we're going to talk about a multi-partied environment where you've got on one side the consumer and the issuing institution, and on the other side, the merchant and the acquiring institution. And we're going to build a set of transactions to allow the merchant and the consumer in an anonymous environment to be able to do business, to buy and sell services. And at the same time, we're going to try to make sure that we minimize the risk because anonymity was a key part of what we were trying to build and what we have successfully built. And then we've got to overlay that on this world called the internet. And on the left side of the screen, you see a graphic that's hung in the MoMA, and it attempted in 2010 to represent every connection that existed anywhere in the world and how all of those connections kind of explode in this beautiful cloud of connectivity. And against that cloud of connectivity back in 1994, we talked about the fact that we don't know who you are when you're on the internet. You can be anybody. It's who you present yourself as that is your identity. And that may not be appropriate when we want to take risk into consideration and we want to know it is you when you present yourself on that computer screen. So again, sticking with the payment landscape and moving from the transaction, I threw up a picture of the inside of a payment card. And my background is in the field of payments, and my last job in the payment industry was working for a card manufacturer. And as I looked at his world and I thought back on my time with MasterCard and Visa and American Express and Europay and Shearson and Bankers Trust and Merrill Lynch and having a chance to meet people like Mike Bloomberg, I began to understand that what we were doing is we were watching the way we transacted, the way we paid each other as we evolved from a world of barter to a world of cards and digital means. Next piece of my presentation is going to take that environment and kind of help you understand movement, help you understand the relationships. And I'm going to start, and here is a template. And we've got this acquiring bank who has a relationship with a merchant. We have this issuing bank who has a relationship with the consumer. We have this scheme here. I've got it identified as the ACH, the Automated Clearinghouse. And we have a set of accounts that are sitting in the books of these various enterprises. And we're going to watch the money move. We're going to watch the information flow. In green and red is the money movement. In blue is the information flow. So let's start with a credit card. You, the consumer, have a relationship with an issuing bank. You, the merchant, have a relationship with an acquiring bank, and you're going to present a token as a consumer to that merchant, and that merchant is going to seek approval. And they're going to go through a process, and eventually they're going to seek to receive their money, and a clearing and a settlement process will take place. And ultimately, the consumer will be billed by the issuer for all of the outstanding amounts owed to the issuing bank, who has already paid, as you watch through the settlement flows, the monies towards the acquiring and ultimately the merchant. If we take debit card payments, again, we start out with counts. In this case, I'm going to present the merchant with a token, and he is going to ask for a financial request. And there's going to be a good funds decision at the end of that transaction while you're still technically in the merchant's office. And we're going to move the money along, and there may be certain delays as we do batch processing to ultimately deliver the funds to that consumer. And if we think about the cards world, we have standards, and here the 8583 and the 220 standards define the transaction flow. Here I've busted out the transaction flow under the 8583 specification. This is what Visa, MasterCard, and the payment scheme use. And it's just a flow of messages, data from point A to point B to confirm that you, the consumer, have the ability to pay for what you, the consumer, are trying to buy from that merchant. So let's look at another time. Remember, I spoke of ACH in the middle, the Automated Clearinghouse, the central bank. And in these cases, what's happening is I'm instructing my bank to pay to the account of the merchant, and the banks are going to move the funds from their account at the central bank to the acquiring bank's account at the central bank, and good funds will be made available. There's also something called the debit transfer. And in this case, we're going to set up an auto pay feature. We're going to reach agreement with the multiple players that the merchant can request payment, and that payment will automatically happen. And I, the consumer, need do nothing more than acknowledge when I see that transaction on my bank statement. So what's the game? The game is all about cost efficiency on one side and profit on the other side. So you have these merchants who see the payment as an expense, and you see these financial institutions that see this as an opportunity to serve and therefore to garner revenue. And when we think about the field of payments, we have to think both international and domestic. And then the card payment world, the way of moving monies internationally was the focus, where in the ACH world, it's very domestic. It's trying to treat the 95% and ignore the 5%. Next piece of the puzzle is who are the players? And I've kind of done Venn diagrams for years to try to help people understand where they live in the environment. So in 1995, for me, this represented the world. We had processors, we had people who were serving this internet, the payment gateway, we had terminal manufacturers, we were creating something called the certificate authority that would allow us to create digital trust. We had card manufacturers and the settlement bank. And as we move forward, the mobile network operators got involved. We created something called tokens or token service managers. We added new registration authorities and governments into the system. We identified the need for identity, so we created identity providers, and we expanded and grew, and the world moved on. So when I kind of go backwards in time and look forward in time, one of the things we have to think about is what are the roles of the different parties in the game? There are global brands, there are regional brands, there are regional rules, there are national brands, there are national regulations, and there are affinity programs and co-branded programs that create commercial opportunities. And the payment operator could be a merchant who has a closed user group of people and they're willing to send you a bill at the end of the month, or they could be groups like Western Union, Visa, and MasterCard. So what is their role, these operators? Their role is to define the rules of engagement, to manage the operating regulations, to ensure global, regional, national acceptance, to manage the advertising for all as to this product works, it is accepted here, it is issued by these institutions, and ultimately to provide the merchant a guarantee that if they accept payment following the rules in the contract, they will have good funds. No presentation can stop with the where we are today. This is a picture that I found in a Federal Reserve and a Bank of International Settlement set of papers. And they called it the money flower, and they began to try to identify the different types of monies that exist, cash being one, cryptocurrencies being another, deposits on funds on deposit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And as I think about all of those, I have to start thinking about who do we trust? Can we trust the government? Some would argue that if we move to cryptographic principles, if we move to mathematic principles, we can create a new axiom of trust. Yet at the same time, we have to wonder who's governing this stuff. Bitcoin is supposed to be this thing that exceeds and supersedes the government, but there is still a governance process, and there are still people involved in that governance process who have influence and therefore control. And as Elon Musk recently identified, some of these cryptocurrencies are pretty damn expensive. They consume electricity because they're built on mathematics and they need computers to run, and the computers need electricity to run, and the electricity needs fuel. And where does that fuel come from? The environment. So let's look at a couple of these digital versions. Back in the 90s, there was something called Mondex, which was attempting to transfer value anonymously between wallets. And there was an atomic process where I had value in my wallet, and I'm going to transfer value atomically to your wallet, and it's gone from mine. I can't double spend. And I can move this back and forth. And at some point in time, if I want that value to go back into the other payment environment, the banking system, I would go and use my bank to deposit funds or load my wallet from funds. More recently, we've decided to coin the concept of cryptocurrencies. And in the concept of cryptocurrencies, we've taken advantage of the construct of a distributed ledger and the blockchain and the concept of hash graphs and hash chains and cryptography to move value atomically between your wallet and my wallet. I'm in this case the sender, so I'm going to instruct my wallet to pay you. You've provided me an address of your wallet, and then the record of that transaction will be recorded across the multiple databases, the multiple ledgers that sit out there in that Bitcoin, blockchain, Ether, Freeton, cloud, depending on what my currency of choice is. Now, against that, for me, has always been this question of liquidity. And when I think about the central bank, and part of its role is to assure liquidity. And when I think about the FDIC, its role is to guarantee that in the event that a bank goes illiquid, your money, your up to $100,000 is protected. But when we move into this cryptocurrency space, and I still need to move in and out of other currencies, I have an exchange. And if you think back to the world of fiat currencies, if I want to buy something in yen and I only have dollars, I go to an exchange and exchange my dollars for yen, and then I'm able to purchase in yen. So in the world of Bitcoin and blockchain and cryptocurrencies, what I need to do is substitute and create a common process. So I have an exchange. I use my dollars. I buy a coin or a set of coins, and then I put that into my lockbox, my wallet, and I transfer it instantaneously to your wallet. And then you take it to your bank, and if you're not going to spend it with somebody else, you're going to want to convert it back into euros. And I can do this very quickly. But if I've got too many coins on one side of the network and not enough coins on the other side of the network, I've got a liquidity problem. And we've got to figure out, as we think about cryptocurrencies and the existence of exchanges and the reality that we don't have one, we will always need to create an exchange. And as soon as I have an exchange, I have a liquidity issue. So this is bringing me kind of to the end of the presentation. If you were here with me, I would say, do you have any questions? Since you're not, I offer you my web address where you can read more, and I offer you my email address where I'm happy to respond to any questions you may have. So thank you for paying attention today. My name is Philip Andre, and I'm here to serve.